2019, I went to Tully's Farm Oktoberfest, and the event was so good. It was an amazing night, one of the best things of 2019, and I couldn't wait to go back to Tully's in the next year. Then coronavirus took over the world, and the world went into lockdown. I had my fingers crossed that by October, COVID-19 be dealt with, and Tully's could be opened in October for its 25th anniversary. But Tully's fell under the dark shadow of coronavirus and was defeated and couldn't open. It's more sad as 2020 was supposed to be Tully's 25th anniversary celebrations, but Tully's created a drive-in cinema with Tully's actors Roman, so Tully's made some money. Loads of people liked the drive-in cinema and it was very successful. Around January or February, Tully's released a promo video announcing Tully's is returning to Fan 21 with footage from past years at Tully's. I again had my fingers crossed that Corona won't take over again. At the time, the country was in lockdown and COVID cases were high. My friend Inferno decided to go to Tully's, but he now doesn't like theme parks, scare attractions, etc. anymore. He's more into clubbing and stuff like that. Tush still wants to go to Tully's. With Inferno having lost interest in theme park scare attractions, travelling to Tully's was quite difficult, but I rose above it. Travelling to theme park scare attractions was easy. I went to theme park and scare attractions with Inferno and Tush, and Inferno's dad Gandalf of Garden drove into theme park scare attractions with Leg, the Best Be Not Forgotten, and The Ride, and The Omen, Fun Bus. Gandalf now has a van which is like a spaceship, called a Fun Truck. I had the same situation with getting to Fort Park. On the 28th of October I went to Tully's. I dressed up to Peaky Blinders for Tully's. I also put fake blood all over my face and gel my hair off. I was also going to take my air horn with me to Tully's, but I couldn't assemble it in time. I was sad about that, but it'd be a bad idea if I took my air horn to Tully's. I have my 2 full pop badges on my Peaky Blinders coat. People love them. Fright Nights tickets are all sold out now. I should have booked them earlier. I'm an idiot, but life got in the way. I was extremely sad about this. I hope Fort Park keep the Fright Nights 20th anniversary celebrations for a few years. I'm extremely worried that the celebration will not be returning next year. I have to go to Fort Park for Fright Nights next year without fail. After 2 failed attempts not going to Fort Park for Fright Nights. I just have to. If only time travel existed, but it's very dangerous. I commented if the 20th anniversary celebration returned next year on Fort Park's Facebook. Fort Park haven't replied. I also asked Jack Superstar and Kieran Adam, and they also haven't replied. I'm just thankful that I was able to go to Fort Park on Oktoberfest opening day. I arrived at Tully's. There's a massive sign of the Tully's logo at the entrance of Tully's and in the car park. That wasn't there in Fan 19. God, I miss Tully's, the theming. The gates with skeletons on is amazing. The skeletons look like animatronics. And the smell of fire and smoke. It is so luxurious and majestic. The fire effects are spectacular. They are all over Tully's. The sound effects and music is amazing. They're so eerie. When I entered the main centre of Tully's, the Tully's band, the Fury of Rock, was playing Howling For You. I saw Joe Cooper. There was still some Tully tour attractions but open for guests, so I and my sister explored Tully's. After 2 years, I'm back at Tully's Farm Oktoberfest, and boy am I excited. My camera's battery wasn't that low, and I charged it in preparation for Tully's. My camera then said the battery in my camera was low when I got to Tolly's. Shit, the battery is actually low, so you may have help. It had not finished charging. I was in Twisted Clowns, Wastelands, Island, Chop Shop area, and I was recording my surroundings when this happened. My camera said the battery was high, then it said it was low. I started to panic, but then my camera said my camera's battery is very low. So this really stressed me out. My sister took some photos and a pan video of our surroundings, which is Wastelands, Twisted Clowns and Island. I was sad I couldn't take any videos or photos. This really pissed me off. The day after Tolly's, when I got home, I was copying over the videos and photos from my camera to my computer. My camera said the battery was 100%. I had to run to the bus stop and then go back home to get my camera battery. But in 2019, the last time I went to Tolly's, I took loads of amazing videos and photos of Tolly's on my phone at the time. And that phone had a better camera than my camera. My camera is better at taking photos rather than videos. Oh well. But I missed out on seeing how the videos and photos would turn up on my camera. My cameras show a different perspective. The first attraction we experienced was Horrorwood Haunted Hayride, better known as the Haunted Hayride. Before guests go in the queue for Hayride, they have 2 green screen photos taken of them. One terrifying, one happy. When I first went to Tolly's, I was like, why haven't we been given the green screen photo? Guests had to take them. I need more money. In the queue there's like an electric light special effect that sounds like fireworks, which I totally forgot about and scared everyone. Frankie and Mummy was in the queue. Mummy asked how I was. At the start of the hayride there were fire effects. I saw a cornfield. A cornfield of that scale would be amazing for a maze with the Thorpe Park Fight Nights crows in. They were in a cornfield in their Fight Nights Fan 20 promo material. The Crows and Walking Meadow is a maze, but Thorpe Park can take it to the next level with a cornfield maze. I don't think a cornfield maze had ever been done in the UK. We also went past multiple hand bodies, a graveyard, a T-Rex prop, loads of massive spiders, an actor who beheaded 3 sharks, the Horrorwood studio bus, clowns with bright lights on them and barrels, a creepy doll that talked in reverse was spinning on a swing, then disappeared, and then it went onto the hayride. There was a section of the hayride where it went into a tunnel, and it was completely dark. Thankfully there were no actors. That was intense, and I was like, when are the actors gonna jump out? There was an actress in a silver dress, like Marilyn Monroe, who came onto the hayride, and she said I should be in a horror film. I totally forgot there was blood all over my face. I told her I'm a Peaky Blinder. She asked, what's a Peaky Blinder? I said something like, I'm a gangster, and before I could finish my sentence, she said, no! Gangsters are bad! Say no to gangsters! Something like that. Hooded actors with corsets on their foreheads then came on the hayride. Then there was a mountain explorer. The clowns with bright lights all over them then came on the hayride. And they told us to shout, oi, body ollie. A chainsaw guy came on the hayride. Then later, there were clowns with chainsaws. Inferno said the chainsaws are real. Thorpe Park knew it was a real one. But when the chainsaw went in my leg, it felt fake. Actors shot machine guns. At the end of the hayride, nuns came. One started twerking to single ladies. People laughed, and I was like, what the fuck? Guests get stunning views of Tolly's on the hayride. When I got off the hayride, the clowns smashed her, grab and poke her, and the nurses were roaming. They were taking photos with guests of Tolly's. I'm imagining Thorpe Park did similar for a Fright Nights attraction. The female and actors are amazing. The actors are so funny and interactive. Everything about Hayride is amazing and unique. A Tolly's fan favourite. An actor on the hayride yelled at my sister, saying, you ate my chicken nuggets! At some time during the night, we were outside the bar by Twisted Clowns, and the Roman clowns and nurses were there. I didn't take a photo of any of them at that point. I took photos of them the last time we went to Tolly's. I and my sister saw a massive purple lighted room, and a school ball light thing. Also, around this time, I made a new friend, Brian the zombie. He said to me, good evening, Mr. Shelby, what's in your hat? I said a razor. He screamed something like, oh no, I'm scared of you. I sound like Jar Jar Binks. The first maze we experienced was the Creepy Cottage. but people just call it Creepy Cottage. Someone in the queue was wearing a Swarm hoodie. I think Inferno had the exact same one. Sad I couldn't talk to him against social media. He was with a girl, presumably his girlfriend. Big up the Swarm! So sad I couldn't experience the Swarm last time at Thorpe Park. So sad I can't go to Thorpe Park and Fight Night to experience the Swarm and the Swarm Invasion. And it's Blackpool 15th last year, so I couldn't experience it one last time. Sad. I can't really remember much from Creepy Cottage. I didn't see any actors for a long time, but when I did, it was amazing. The actors do such a good job. The set design and theme of Creepy Cottage is amazing. The story of Creepy Cottage was told by someone over hidden speakers. There was a lot of screaming and loud noises. An actor played a creepy old piano, then slammed it shut. And then the actor started interacting with the group I was in. Sinister music played throughout the whole attraction. The turning around the corner moments were intense. We never knew if there'd be an actor. An actor was smashing something aggressively on a table. That happened last time I experienced Creepy Cottage. And actors followed us. Across the whole cottage there were ancient photos of family members. I went through multiple rooms. Some had old paintings and pictures of like old houses and a rose in. I went into a room and there was a woman with black hair, with a big star symbol imprinted on her forehead, with blood on, dripping onto her nose. And the 666 symbol was in big letters across the right side of her forehead. In the next room there was a ginger haired woman growling at me, with 2 lines of blood on her forehead on each side. The left was the biggest and was dripping. And a line of blood was dripping down on both of her eyes, and blood on the bottom of her left cheek, and on her lip, dripping down her mouth and chin. There was a massive clock in front of the rooms, and I saw a corpse of a woman in a bath, with blood and chains all over her, and a human skull lying beside her. At the end of the maze there were flashing lights, and a man with something white all over his face like flour was screaming. Standard horror attraction, amazing, but moderate horror, tamest of all the attractions. Speaking honestly, probably the weakest attraction of them all. After experiencing Creepy Cottage, my sister said we're experiencing attractions too quickly. So we went to the bar, and I wasn't asked for ID as I looked 30, and my sister did. I had a double rum and coke. The next maze we experienced was Twisted Clouds. The queue felt like it was gonna go on forever. Guests experienced this maze wearing 3D glasses. Strange music played. Nothing is ever gonna beat the Big Top music. It's so good! A clown was swinging. There was a car painted black with the same clown graffiti that is seen on like the walls of the maze. Twisted Clouds hasn't changed much since Fan 19 from what I've seen. Well, all the attractions haven't changed much, but they're still brilliant. And I get excited to experience them every time I go to Tolly's. The set design, theming and actors of Twisted Clouds are very good. The next maze we experienced after Twisted Clouds was Wastelands Penitentiary. Everything about Wastelands is amazing. The set design, theming, actors, costumes, the effects, lighting, music, design and the Wastelands area is beautiful. Not sure if that plane is real like the plane at Swarm Island. Apparently the Wastelands show did return this year, but I didn't see it being performed at any point of the night. It was an addition to Wastelands in its first year performing into Fan 19, which performed every half an hour. The show was amazing when I experienced it into Fan 19, and it was a very high highlight of Tolly's and my trip to Tolly's to Fan 19. I couldn't see why Tolly's would discontinue it. The whole event in Fan 19 was amazing. It's amazing every year! There was an actor wearing a Purge-like mask. The music of Wastelands is so epic. It's like a drum and electric guitar drop. It was awesome hearing it in Wastelands and the Wastelands queue, in a loop with purple moving lights in the queue, covering the queue line, with the amazing theming of prison doors in the queue to separate groups. I love it. You saw what Wastelands is? The prisoners of the prison have been set free, because the prison and security has washed away. And the security stopped working, and the prisoners have killed the guards. We entered the Watton prison. We saw a black haired girl with blood splattered all over her face. Blood was all over her left eyebrow. Lines and small drops of blood was on her forehead, dripping onto her nose, and there were lines on both her cheeks, along with a long line mark on the left side of her face. So many actors terrorised me. Heck, there was a prisoner wearing goggles and had green hair. We went through a laundry and then we went through a cage maze which went on for a long time. Full of actors, dare I say. Words can't describe how amazing Wastelands is. I can't pinpoint when, but at some point in the night I saw the identical twins. They had their wigs on, sometimes they don't. And I also saw Fanny Moore and the legend Brian saying, "I'm scared of you, Mr. Shelby." After Aisland, we experienced the cellar. In the queue, Frankie came up to me, don't know where Mummy was. He said something like, "Good evening, Mr. Shelby. Evening being or Birmingham or your brothers?" We entered a path themed like a jungle. The actors are absolutely nuts. There was an actor screaming in pain behind the ivy theming. There was a blow up bed kind of thing which slows guests down, so that Rumble and the Toddler get scared shitless by the actors. There's never been anything like that in a Fright Nights attraction. A snake came out. We entered an old eerie house with a painting of a lake. An actor jumped out near a staircase, which was really a theme like Fan 19. We went through a tight vent with a big red light above us, and actors yelled and banged on the opposite side. We entered a foggy praise-like prison like the one from Wastelands, but not so big. It was full of smoke with the same music from Chop Shop playing, and actors were on the cage screaming attempting to grab us. After that, we entered the bedrooms of the characters, and the head of heads stuck to the ceiling. The actors were chained up. We entered a maze of the actors' clothes. We went through another haunted house with saucepans on the wall. We finally entered the cellar with a collection of cuddly toys. Really amazing remaining theming and actors. All the attractions at Toddy's are amazing. After the cellar, we experienced Hellements. The hooded maze at Toddy's, they changed the name. In Fan 19 it was called XIXI. I felt water, fire, steam, smoke and air. Just like in Fan 19, nothing has changed about the attraction except the name. We then had a break from the attractions, and we ate a very delicious donut waffle Oreo thing covered with ice cream. There's a bridge at Toddy's, where the roaming actors can interact with guests and oversee Toddy's. It makes Toddy's very iconic, the bridge stage and the hayride. But I think other scare parks have done similar to the bridge, but Toddy's got that first. But sometime during the night, the roaming actors, can't remember them all. The nurses and clowns might have been on the bridge. I know Hum said that Brian was on the bridge. I couldn't really hear him, but I think he said, "Oh no, hello Mr. Shelby." Something like that. After the break, we experienced the Village Covenant of 13. God, the queue went on forever. Didn't feel like it ever ended. It was worse than Twisted Clowns. It was like if the queue was 2 hours long. I think it was actually predicted 45 minutes. My sister said the reason the queues are so long is because it's been 2 years, it's near Halloween, and it is one of Toddy's busiest days. After we experienced a hayride, the queue for hay was like 75 or 90-minute wait. But when I got home from Toddy's posted on their social media a picture I saw on Facebook, and the caption of the post was, "Better chance of surviving the night in a group." And the people in that group were at Toddy's the same day me and my sister were, and these people were none other than Zalella, Factor Joe, Pointless Blog, Factor Joe's girlfriend, Mark, Zalella's friend, Pointless Blog's sister, and James fucking Buckley. They were in the school ball like thing. My sister said that Toddy's had to sneak them into the front of the queues, otherwise crowds of the fans would be screaming. Me and my sister didn't see them, which I'm sad about. When I was in the toilets, I thought Kieran Adams came in, which thankfully it wasn't. I would love to meet and take photos with Kieran, just not in the toilet. And the person had similar hair to Kieran Adams. I would love to meet and chat and take selfies with the whole Jack Silverton gang, just not in the toilet. Anywhere but. They know who I am. I messaged and emailed them. Sure the name Tech Archer rings a bell. I like the name. It's cool. I love it when people call me that name. I like technology. I know a lot about technology, and I can fix technology. It describes my personality. I was thinking when Still For His Kill, why do we make in the worst and random moments? It'd be an imbalanced situation to meet a celebrity in the toilets. The Jack Silverton gang love Toddy's. But Jack hasn't published his Toddy's video for this year. They usually would have gone by now. And they'd have been extremely busy with Fright Nights and the promo material for Fright Nights. But they love Toddy's. Wouldn't they have thought to just dry down for the night? They went to scare parks in Bristol and Northampton, so why hadn't they gone to Toddy's? We entered the smoky light path. We then entered the next part of the maze. The witch actress was screaming, and there was a massive green light, which I guess is supposed to represent witchcraft. The same blow up bed kind of thing from the cellar is in this part of the maze as well. Witch actors are in the floor, which they then disappear and go beneath guests and scare them like a shark. The branches of wood light theming continues throughout the whole attraction. The green glow was in other parts of the maze frequently. The witch actress jumped at us. We entered a forest themed path, and the witches yelled at us. The next part of the maze had fences, made out of tree branches with torches on them, and a bright yellow light was glowing behind the fences, which reminded me of Wicker Man. We then went into an old abandoned looking house with a white door. A guest knocked on the door. We were greeted by an actress. When we entered, a witch was screaming and torturing someone. The person screamed for help. A lantern was flickering. We entered a room and a witch was screaming and being aggressive. I tended to throw an old-fashioned chair at guests. All collapsing books were on the bookcase in the same room. A witch actress then jumped in front of me and screamed. I think we had to then walk beneath a chimney. I might be getting confused with Twisted Clowns. A witch actress then screamed and hit the wall saying, "Go!" I think. Then another witch came up to me and screamed at me. A witch had her hands on the Ouija board and then stared at me. It was like she was frozen. Witches kept coming up to me and screamed their heads off. We left the house. We walked through a path covered in forest theming and massive trees and branches. We entered another house. A witch in Black Groves was casting spells saying, "You will die tonight." A witch with short, blonde, curly hair with blood on her forehead, and she said like Gollum, "You don't know how she feels." She reached her hand out at a guest. The same fence female was in the house. A black-haired witch said, "You will suffer as they suffered. You will not survive the night." We walked down another forest-covered path in complete darkness. We walked past two fires. We heard witches screaming in another house we were about to enter. We walked down a path. The same fences continued throughout the attraction. There was a fire everywhere. The witches were casting spells and tortured someone who was caged in prison made out of wood and straw. Full of yellow smoke, we left the house. We walked down a very long dark path, which led to a room full of witches with yellow and red smoke. Covered in a very long maze, but was definitely worth the long way. Superb acting and theming. Tolly's was closing soon, so me and my sister decided what attraction, without fail, we definitely had to experience before leaving Tolly's. We had not yet experienced the island, Circus of Horrors or Chop Shop, and my sister said we had to experience Chop Shop no matter what. The queue wasn't that bad either. I remember the start because I was about to go before experiencing the maze. He put me right at the front. I was shitting myself, and I looked at my sister and her reaction. An actor opened the door, which is how guests enter the maze. The actor says, "Hey, you where you be? I've been waiting for you guys all night." Damn! Follow me through here, I'm gonna show you my best friends. I've been working on her all night and all day. We walked past a vintage wooden truck, and an actor jumped out at us. And I think I said, "Oh my god, oh Jesus." We walked through stacks of shelves of old wooden unusable machinery. A woman yelled hi. Epic heavy metal music started playing, and dead, burnt looking like animals were hanging on meat hooks. Blood was all over the walls, implying loads of people have been brutally killed here by chainsaws. The music just got louder and there were fast flashing lights. I started to hear chainsaws. There were multiple actors waving chainsaws around. The actors didn't really do much with the chainsaws till the run out. I thought it was a weak run through, as Chop Shop is supposed to be chainsaw chaos, with 20 actors with chainsaws attacking guests at each corner. Maybe the chainsaws had no fuel and the actors were lacking chainsaws. I know there's a chainsaw in the island, so that might be another reason why. But for Park Fright Night this year, I think Creep Feet Massacre and Creep Feet Unchained are the only attractions to have chainsaws. Don't think there's a chainsaw in trailers. And in Jack's POV video of Creep Feet Massacre, there was only a chainsaw in the run out, which is nothing compared to Creep Feet Massacre in Fan 90, because at the climax of the maze, it was mental. Every actor had a chainsaw and was waving it about, but it was open at night. And Fright Nights isn't always ready or completely finished on the first few days of the event. And I was wondering if Creep Feet Massacre is worth £10 when I was thinking of going to Thorpe Park for Fright Nights. I know Creep Feet Unchained has massively changed, so there might be more chainsaws in Unchained. This year has been weak for chainsaws that scare events. It's sad because in Fan 19, when I first went to Tolly's and I experienced Chop Shop, I couldn't really experience it because my shoes came off. And I spent most of the maze in complete darkness putting them back on. I could have been decapitated. Another reason is they probably had to lose all the chainsaws for the Leonard Joe put the vlog and James Buckley. Chop Shop is short but very effective. It needs to be longer, but that's hard to do. Tolly's might be able to extend the maze somehow. Chop Shop is a very strong maze. Great theming and actors. If these sickest scare events started with fake human skin and loads of blood and chainsaws to make them more scary and gory. In video content, there'll be a close-up shot which zooms in and there's an eerie sound of chainsaw killing people and the high-pitched screams of the people echo. Sadly we didn't have time to experience the island or the Circus of Horrors, but my sister said we experienced them first when we go to Tolly's next year, and Haywire when it's darker. If we have time after Chop Shop, maybe we could experience one more attraction, my sister said. Circus of Horrors is very good and disturbing. Apparently to confirm though, it never changes. Might have done now because of the pandemic. Back when you loved roller coasters and horror mazes. The Island is Tolly's new maze for this year to celebrate 25 years of Tolly's. Don't know much about it because I didn't want to spoil it for myself. I'm annoyed with Tolly's for stealing Thorpe Park's tagline now. We then left Tolly's. The nurse was at the exit, so I took a photo of them. Next year, without fail, I must try Tolly's hot chocolate. Apparently it's delicious. Inferno, Tush Tush and Gandalf tried it in 2019. I didn't experience the Island or the Circus of Horrors, so I can't judge them fairly, so I won't review them. But the Circus of Horrors was extremely good when I experienced it in 2019. It was very disturbing, but in a good way. All the attractions of Tolly's are of such high quality. But I can't say they're all good. Most are the same quality, but some are weaker. I would say my least favourite attraction is Helmet, as it's a hooded maze, and hooded mazes are never good. There's only one good one at Extreme Scream Park. There's only really sounds and smoke. My sister said it was scary as you couldn't see your surroundings. My second least favourite attraction is Creepy Cottage. It's fantastic, but it's a weaker maze compared to the others. It was one of Tolly's first scare attractions. It's impressive it's still around. Not of a strong quality compared to like Chop Shot and Wasteland. But I can't say Creepy Cottage is my favourite attraction. My sixth favourite attraction was the Cellar. Extremely good maze, great story, acting, theming and lighting. My fifth favourite attraction was Twisted Clown, great effects, theming, actors and set design. My fourth favourite attraction was Chop Shot. I ranked it low because of the lack of chainsaws. It's still a great attraction and had loads of fun in there. The actors weren't even screaming at us. The music and theme was amazing as always though. My third favourite attraction was the Hayride, just everything about it. The actors, the theme and just how iconic the attraction is. There's only one of its kind in the UK. Not sure about America or other countries. My second favourite attraction was the Village Covenant 13. Just everything about it is amazing. The actors, theming and effects are amazing, and my top favourite attraction at Tolly's is Wastelands. Words can't describe how amazing Wastelands is. The theming, actors, costumes, effects, lighting, music and set design, and the Wastelands area is amazing. I'm kind of disappointed as this year is Tolly's 25th anniversary celebrations, but it's the 26th as it was postponed due to COVID. Tolly's was amazing as always, but there wasn't anything additional for Tolly's 26th anniversary celebrations, just branded as that. The Island was amazing to celebrate the anniversary, but isn't anything spectacular. It's a bit weak from what I've seen in YouTube walkthrough videos, especially in comparison to the effort that Thorpe Park did for Fright Night's 20th anniversary. The amount of effort, enthusiasm and hard work that everyone who was involved in the event paid off. All the attractions are of strong quality. The amount of detail. There was also the long awaited return of Creep Feet Massacre and Platform 15 last year, which was epic, and Platform 15 was in its best form. It got the end it deserved. Sad I never got to experience it. There are 3 attractions to mark 20 years of Fright Nights. Legacy brought back the music of The Freezer, Experiment 10, Blair Witch, Studio 13, Big Top, and Platform 15, Creep Freak and Amity High vs Lycanthrope music was used. Not actually original music for the mazes, but the Saw theme and the Walking Dead theme was used to represent Saw Live and the Walking Dead mazes, Live a Nightmare and Do or Die, and Perfect Day. And Trailers brought back Big Top in all its glory! The amount of detail and enthusiasm Jack Silverstone and Kieran Adams put into the promo works for the event. The aesthetics of each trailer is absolutely beautiful. I love it. The trailers are so cinematic. The VHS style of Birthday Batch is a beauty. The park's marketing has leveled up massively. My favourite trailers are Creep Feet Massacre and Creep Freaks Unchanged. The music for all the attractions and around the park are top notch and very immersive. Tolly's didn't need to do much. Put a sign and loads of banners and posters around Tolly's. Tolly's could have made an attraction like a ghost tour, where someone has a projector and tells the audience of why the land on Tolly's is cursed, and show pictures from all the attractions over the years, and there's actors locked up in lockers. And the couch break free and the guests had to run through smoke to escape. It's where Tolly's merchandise which you got recently. Tolly's bag, Tolly's hat which is my favourite hat. Tolly's shirt.
Yo, what is going on, guys? Silk Zone tonight is finally the night. The 4-part Fright Nights press event, which means I'm finally getting in all of the new Fright Nights editions for this year. I'm so excited. I'm going to be telling you guys all about the attractions in this vlog, reviewing them, and yeah, I'm just so excited tonight. Of course, first up, it's the brand new maze for this year, trailers. Oh yes, let's not mess around and go and experience this brand new horror maze. Come on!
I should have bought the tickets earlier, then I would have had an amazing night, the atmosphere would have been spectacular, and I would have experienced trailers and legacy. Please can return next year, and I could experience Platform 15 one last time. It looks so good. Can Fort make Platform return in like 5 years?
It's just amazing. And I've got one of the scariest rooms. Oh my god. Pick up the birds every time.
Oh bollocks. I could have lose my Oktoberfest ticket to get into the park.
Jesus!
Congratulations for getting to both Fort Park and Tuddy's Farm. We recognise there was struggles,
Oh thanks bro!
but things are still not in place. The ice caps are melting, this world is falling, and is falling into another, and the others will come.
I'm so sorry, I tried so hard to make a Vernon come to theme parks and scare parks for me, but he thinks clubs and girlfriends are better. Oh, shit.
You're still a virgin.
Hey! You do realise we're in a bloody pandemic that's been going for nearly 2 years, and sex was banned at some point.
Because of the virus, the others couldn't come here. They hate the rules. As you know, Freddy spoke to you in your dreams about a false prophecy last Halloween. Next Halloween, if there's not a lockdown, you must without fail lose your virginity. Do this to fix the timeline. As well as this, you must go to Fright Nights next year. We knew the pandemic was coming. It was bound to happen. That's why Freddy told you not to look at the page about 2020 in the book he gave you. In fact, any future events. If you found out and did anything drastic, the fate of this world will be wiped. You have no idea what the future holds. What is planning will come. The pandemic is a fixed point in history. It showed what society had become and showed how the people of its planet will just watch its planet rot and do nothing. The event made people appreciate the blessings more and made them change their ways. And the way society reacted shows the true colours of the human race. The humans became corrupted. Humans have shown their most horrific and selfish actions for a very long time in history. The human race will destroy this planet. The people are killing the environment and the animals, and due to this world is leaking into others. Entrances to other worlds and timelines are opening and are coming to Earth and will wreck this planet. Worlds no one knows about. There are dangerous life forms and environments, and the hidden dark timelines of this planet. Imagine if Hitler won, or Kennedy didn't die, and its Princess Diana wasn't in that crash. The amount of carnage those timelines have, and if they come to Earth, this planet will become destroyed. The universe circles around Earth and depends on it. Then look what happened. And if this planet falls, so will the other universes and multiverses. There's powerful forces that are coming to Earth. They know this planet and its people are vulnerable. They will destroy the planet and its people, and the oblivious world leaders, they won't take any action, and they're pathetic, and they will be destroyed. But Freddy couldn't tell you the truth. Look what's happening. We recommend us extraterrestrial, paranormal and supernatural are some of your strong feels to get ready for action, and get other geeks, form a group. Also, you need a girlfriend to share your youth with. And you and her need to do some things for us. Get your girlfriend in this group. And the ignorant people who worked us and put us in this state. Now that the pandemic is mostly dormant, we must go to work. Theme parks, game parks and Comic Con events to fix the timeline. I'm sorry, he died. I watch more horror films and create your own. You come in handy next time when we see you. Because the others can come now, and the state they're in, we must get more horror film props from our films as well. Very important. I got a message from Freddy.
Hello Archie, or Archie Rochester 43rd, or whatever you call yourself now. As Jigsaw said, this world is being built by the humans, and we have rotted away and become jokes. Hollywood has forgotten about us, and people love the 80s. Makes no sense, doesn't it? We are letting it all over Stranger Things. If we were in charge, the planet and society would be in a better place. And people would actually obey us, as they are terrified of us, the human race. Fear anything you don't understand. Now, Archie, you're a filmmaker, and you love horror. More specifically, slasher films, horror films. We're not scary anymore. No more creative people in Hollywood, and our sex offender works on many of our films and has given us a bad name. We need fresh blood, creative talents. We need to make horror films and build a fan base. And once you have mastered horror, you need to bring us back. Me, Jason, Marco's been screwed over yet again. Leatherface, Ghostface, Chucky and Jigsaw. All legacy have been molded with more than what is over-the-top jump scares and CGI and graphic sexy and over-the-top horny teenagers. It's horror. It's a stuff on. That's not horror. That's horny. It's laughable. This is the whole point. It's scary alone. We walked in our prime. Horror is abysmal. The film industry is filled with hacks with no original ideas. They try so hard and fail miserably. Less is more. Yes, the 2018 Halloween remake is amazing. No sex, straight to horror, focuses on horror. Cooperative gets swirling, violence and sex seem to remain more in the original film. That's why it succeeded. The sex scenes were horrific, but more fundamental to the plot film. So they were willing and needed to be in the film. As teenagers have sex, especially in haunted houses. I want the film to be flawless all the way through. But the new Halloween film missed the whole point of Michael, saying he was a weird kid that was perverted. It's a group of people trying to kill Michael, but Michael is way stronger than them. Yes, this 1978 flashback were very impressive. What makes Michael so scary? And Rob Zombie missed the whole point of it. Is that out of nowhere, Michael brutally killed his sister. He did kill his sister when she was completely nude, so that's probably where David Gordon Green got the idea from. And then the Rob Zombie remake, he made the sister such a bitch, which made everyone want her to be dead. The gore is amazing, the gruesome kills. We are all cheering. I want us to be the toppers in class, and we are graffiti. People drip by outside for a house party, and there's places of us all over the world. Hollywood has fallen. Let's see Britain has new blood in the creative aspect at least. Why not Halloween make loads of horror films? Don't worry, I see everything. The CGI in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake by Michael Bay was horrific. They are not the original films with low budget, so take that as inspiration. Do practical effects. They are so much better than CGI. Make connections at Comic Con. Get cosplayers to play us. Save you spending loads of money on props and costumes. Practice makes perfect. We see the films you make, and we tell you what me and Jigsaw, what we like and what we want to see in your films. We want to see unique and creative plots that haven't been done a dozen times, just like the classics. No repeated formulas, great intense music, great camera shots, practical effects and jump scares, and unique editing. As friends with Weinstein, look at classics and other horror films for examples. The good stuff, not the modern ones. They're garbage. We should be gods again because of you, Archie, and you will be a god too. Rich and famous, and the birds will be after you, and then you would definitely not be a virgin. You will be a legend, blessed by millions, and our film to make you one of the biggest filmmakers. Laser stuff in the materials in the film if some people are interested in that, so I can relate to them. But again, create unique material to be blessed. Hollywood has no clue to stories now. The Golden Age was really the Golden Age. I know you don't believe me. See you next time in you little bit. And do as I said, all work here.
At the Autumn Clouds Resort.